What's up everyone, Lethal Concept here. I hope you had a great day. I'm back with my part 2 for my Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Mass Effect Andromeda Multiplayer. This time we're talking about enemy races. Now there are 3 primary enemy races that you'll be facing in your missions. To keep it simple without divulging into too much of the lore of the single player aspect of the game, these are the brief outlines of them. Outlaw, which are a collection of ragtag, mostly brigands, pirates and mercenaries. Ket, which are brutal conquerors from an unknown galaxy in the Andromeda universe. And lastly we have the Remnant, which are a technologically advanced remains of a mysterious creator species. While a lot of players and people don't classify enemies into enemy types, I'm going to classify them to make them easier to explain for me and to help categorize them easier. So first of all, you got your standard enemy slash mooks. Now every race has at least 2 of these and they both do different things. Each race has at least 1 melee standard mook and 1 range standard mook. And standard mooks are enemies that you face regardless of difficulty that all have red health bars. Now the melee standard mook will always have a grapple function and the main form of attack is melee. And what that means is that once a standard mook that is melee specific gets into melee range, they will attempt to grapple you, and if they are successful, you will require to button mash a specific button to release yourself. The other standard mook, which is the range standard mook, is a shooting type of standard mook. They will just shoot you from cover and they'll use cover just like you do. Both types are not dangerous by themselves, however if you allow them to surround you, you might find yourself in some bad times. Next of all we have shielded enemies slash mooks. Now these are what I consider mid-tier enemies. These mobs have shields on top of their health bars and any crowd control effect except for electrical based crowd control effects won't affect them. These mobs are tougher to deal with because they have an extra layer of quote unquote health called shields, which regenerates if they don't take damage after time. So therefore if you want to kill them you have to get rid of their shields and then take down their health before their shields regenerate. Shields allow the mob to shrug off any non-electrical based form of crowd control, things like stagger and burning. Next up we have armored elites. Now these guys have armor instead of health, and armor gives damage reduction against attacks. They actually still suffer from crowd control effects such as stagger and burning, so some may consider these armored elites easier to deal with than shielded elites, unless of course it's an armored boss type, because crowd control effects have no effect on boss type mobs. Also fire based abilities deal extra damage against armor. Now next up we have boss mobs. Now these are your end tier enemies. They have really large health and or armor, or they have really large armor and shields. So they have different health, quote unquote health with armor and shields depending on what mob it is. Now they do require different tactics and some even require teamwork to efficiently take down. These mobs also have ways to instantaneously kill you, and these mobs should definitely be given caution and respect when fighting against them. Now, widely regarded as the easiest race to play against, Outlaws will be the first race I will cover, followed by the Remnant. Remnant is what people usually consider the second easiest or the second hardest, with Ket following the last. Ket is considered the hardest race to play against, and all weak spots or weak point shots are considered to be in the head, otherwise stated by me. So first off the enemy list for Outlaws are the Addars. Now Addars are your melee standard enemies. They are like a cross between a lizard and a dog, and they move fairly fast. So the main form of attack is actually a lunging melee attack from long range, and this will actually stagger you. If they get in close range however, they have a grappling attack which I explained earlier. The best way to deal with them is dodging left and right constantly. This helps avoid their grapple and their charge if you time it correctly. And you also hear them close range when they emit a gurgling noise. They do this when they attack, or they do this when they're about to attack. After that we have the Raiders. Now these are your range standard enemies. They're your typical standard shooter. They wear red clothing. They tend to stick to mid-range to take shots at you, and if you engage them at close range they try to melee you. So they're not hard to deal with. They're hard to deal with in groups sometimes when you're taking enemy fire and you're concentrating on something else like boss mobs or armored elites. The best way to deal with them if they stick into cover is wait for them to stick their heads out and take pot shots of them. And if you have an accurate weapon you can take easier headshots when they stick their head out of cover. Next up we have sharpshooters. Now sharpshooters are the first shielded enemy that you'll likely encounter. They look about the same as raiders except they have shields. As I explained earlier, when they shoot they actually are doing what their name implies, which is using a sniper rifle. They have a red laser pointed at whoever gets targeted, and they deal a fairly large amount of damage after a brief delay. You can rush in to try and neglect their range damage, which forces them to either melee or retreat, but you take them out the same way as you do raiders. You try to aim for their head when they try to shoot out of cover. Next up we have the armored elites. Now the armored elites for outlaws are a bit more diverse than the other races because they have armored elites from almost every race of the Andromeda universe. So the first one that I'll talk about is the Pariah. Now the Pariah are a close range biotic Asari. Don't worry too much about races, I'll talk a bit of them later on. So they wield a close range shotgun, which obviously they deal large damage at close range, and they also create a biotic shield which reflects damage taken from bullets and projectiles. How you actually deal with them, or when they have their shield up, is you aim AoE, crowd control or stagger abilities around them, so you stagger them and then make them drop their shields. You can also fire on the outer edges of the shield so that it reflects it away from you. If you fire in the center, it reflects it onto you and deals damage towards you. Otherwise, their weak points are still this, or their critical point are still the same place, their head, and that's the main way you deal with them. Next up we have the agents. Now agents are also an armored elite, and they are more of a medium range, aimed using a pistol. They are of the Solarian race, and they are able to make a moving hologram of itself that takes extra damage. The hologram is easily identifiable from the breaking image lines. Think of a broken TV or a TV with bad reception. Now, I don't consider the agents dangerous or the clones dangerous, however they may draw fire and you may divert attention from more dangerous threats, and that is the main problem that the agents pose. Next up we have the armored elite called the Saboteur. Now the Saboteur are a close to medium range Angarian, and they use what appears to be a pistol for shooting. Now their special ability is that they have the ability to siphon shields. After they siphon the shields from the target, their target receives a stagger. So you see the animation of the Saboteur from sapping the shields is when they raise their hand up and they kind of look upwards. You'll see this in the footage, and when they sap the shields, it converts your shields to them, and they have a shields along with their armor. Next up we have the Anarchists. Now the Anarchists are a close range Turian race. They use shotgun blasts to do a significant amount of damage at close range, and when their target is a bit further away, they actually can throw a grenade that when it explodes causes an incendiary field after detonation. Now this incendiary field can actually deal pretty significant amount of damage over time. Now I haven't talked about too much about how to deal with armored elites. These armored elites that I've been talking about can all be staggered and therefore all have easy headshots. They are pretty much your standard enemies except they take a bit less damage, and they all have special abilities. Next up we have the Berserkers. Now while Berserkers are what would be classified as armored elites in my categorization, I would actually consider them a half boss mob type because of how tanky and resistant they are. And by resistant I mean how resistant they are to certain crowd control effects such as stun and burning. They are of the Krogan race, and Krogans are known for their high health. And they deal damage in two ways, and the first of which is using a staggering shotgun. They use their shotguns at close to medium range, and the shotgun has a delay before the next shot, and after 3 shots they reload. They also have a charging melee attack which staggers, and they only do that either when they are so far away that they can't use their shotgun on you and they still have vision of you, or that they take a significant amount of damage, then become enraged, and after emitting a war cry constantly try to charge you. Now if you actually deal enough damage that they reach the point where they become enraged, and if you don't finish them off, after every war cry they do regenerate a bit of health. Next up we have the Hydra. Now Hydra are the only mob in Outlaws that I would consider a boss mob. They look like a large robot, and their 3 main attacks are long range hand cannon, guidance missile system, and an insta-kill sync kill at close range. Now I've been playing gold for a long time and I have not been sync killed by a Hydra yet, so I'm guessing it happens rarely, and I'm guessing it happens when you stay in their melee range for a while. Now first of all, the main concern that you should be worried about is the guidance missile system. This pretty much will kill you instantly if you get hit by them. So what you actually do is, there's a spot on their head which looks like, I guess, a head basically, and if you target it with a lot of damage or use your bullets, so you can actually break it, and this will cause the missile system guidance to go offline. You can break the missile system in two ways, and that is either by shooting it or using explosions from either your biotic, tech, cryo, or incendiary types. Now, it still fires missiles, but instead of targeting you with the 3 lasers, it'll actually disperse the missiles all around. So it makes it pretty easy to deal with. The long range hand cannon is not as damaging, and you can pretty much get into cover before the long range hand cannon can actually kill you. Now, there is a second weak spot, and the second weak spot is at the back of the robot, which you see a kind of black oil tank or fuel tank, I'm guessing, and the hitbox on that is a bit weird. You'll have to aim on the upper or lower part of the fuel cell to actually get the hitbox crit spot right, but that's really it. He's not a hard mob to deal with. You just have to be careful when dealing with his missile systems. Next up, these are the remnant enemies. And remnant enemies actually have a weak spot wherever you see a kind of red eye-ish area. The red eye is considered their weak spot or weak critical point. Now, the first one is the assembler, and the assembler is actually the range standard enemy of the remnant. The reason I didn't actually talk about the breacher first, which for outlaws I actually said the addy first, which are the melee standard enemies instead of the range standard enemies first, is because the assembler can actually spawn breaches. Now, first of all, assembler look like a robotic walking enemy, and they have a rifle type laser attack. So they actually spawn breaches by throwing grenades. Now, most actual enemies that throw grenades use it for damage. The assembler actually throws grenades which spawns breaches. They're pretty fragile, so anything can kill them. And obviously next up we have the breaches. Now, breaches are your melee standard enemies, and they kind of look like a floating robotic crab. Now, they have, I guess, 2 different attacks. Actually 3 actually. They have a melee staggering hit, and they grapple like the addy. And the third one is they can actually do a suicide charge, which they explode and when it reaches towards you, and this also staggers you. Now, these are obviously easy to kill because they're melee standard enemies. They have no shields. You can CC them, you can also take them out. Their health is so low that pretty much any bullets or any type of damage will kill them pretty fast, so that's it for them. Next up, we have the observers. Now, observers are your shielded enemies, and these just look like a floating robotic eye. They have a continuous lasing tracking beam, and this actually is a pretty long range weapon, so you sometimes may find that they're pretty close and sometimes they might be pretty far away. The best way to actually deal with them is either using a stun technique, since you can only CC shielded enemies with electrical based effects which stun them, or you use a sniper rifle long range weapon to take them out. Next up we have the nullifiers, and nullifiers are an armored elite. So the best way to imagine a nullifier is like a spider with only 2 legs. Now, it has a couple of special abilities, and the first one is it deploys a shield when in quote-unquote artillery mode, and in that mode it fires energy projectiles which penetrates through walls and cover, and also staggers. Now, the best way to deal with that is that you either engage it in melee range, so that the nullifier has to engage in melee, or you shoot the body of it. Now, you can't shoot the head when it's in the shield mode, you can only shoot it when the shields are down, and that is because the head is kind of below the center body. And the weak point, the red eye, is in that area, and the only part that's really exposed are the sides and the body when it's in the shield artillery mode. Next up we have the boss mob for the remnants, and that is called a destroyer. Now, a destroyer is kind of like a walking tower with 2 turrets on the side, and both of the turrets fire rapidly, and they deal a pretty significant amount of damage. You really need to get in cover. It kind of has 3 attacks. Well, I wouldn't say attacks, but it has 3 ways of dealing damage. And so the first way is that obviously both turrets are constantly firing. The second one is that it fires 2 insta-kill rockets, or 2 insta-kill cannon shots after charging. The charging is a significant delay, so you should be able to get into cover soon if you see that it's charging its shot. And it fires twice, so don't peek out of cover when it fires the first shot. Also, if you get into melee range, it actually emits a kind of constant damaging area of effect damage, and also it emits an electrical area of effect damage once you destroy it, so don't get close to it once you destroy it as well. Now, the weak points for the destroyer are the 2 turrets. The 2 turrets actually act as weak point spots for it, and I'm guessing it's to make it easier to destroy the turrets. Also, the second weak point is the kind of mouth that opens when it tries to fire its cannon shot. So because it has a long delay, you can try and get shots off, but if you want to play a bit safer, you could just fire over the cover without aiming, and you could just wait it out. Next up we have the Ket. Now the Ket are considered the hardest race to play against for two main reasons. The first one being that they have two mobs that are considered boss type mobs, and they both have insta sync kills. And they're both pretty tanky, and one of them requires quite a bit of teamwork. Well, it doesn't require teamwork, but it requires a lot more kind of team play to take down. And the second reason is that they have a stealth mechanic that's not seen in the Mass Effect universe before. Normally when an enemy stealths, that when they shoot at you, they actually briefly flicker or their stealth goes off so that you can target them and shoot them. However, in this game version of multiplayer, when the enemy stealths and they shoot at you, you can't target them and they remain invisible, so they become a bit of more of a nuisance and harder to deal with, and you have to play a bit more cautious around these types of enemies. As with all enemies, imagine their hit point or the weak critical spot are in their head unless otherwise stated. Now the first enemy of the Ket are the Wraiths. Now these are a standard melee enemy. What you can do is imagine an Adi, but a bit more alienish, and also imagine everything an Adi can do. That's pretty much what a Wraith is, but the Wraith can also do it from stealth. So they're a bit more annoying to deal with. Also, I should mention that any stealth enemy for the Ket won't show up on the radar, so you actually can't see them using the compass. And I guess that makes them a bit more annoying to deal with, but you mainly hear them howl, do this kind of howl, before they engage on you, so you can use that to your advantage. Next up we have the Chosen. Now nothing much needs to be said about the Chosen except that the range standard enemy for the Ket, Raiders for Outlaw, Assemblers for Remnant, Chosen for Ket, range standard enemies, they shoot assault rifles and they use cover. Pretty much the same thing. Next up we have the Anointed. Now the Anointed are a shielded enemy, and they use kind of like medium to long range-ish rapid fire chain gun that uses rapid fire energy weapon, which deals large amounts of sustained damage after charging. They move slower when they're firing, and what you can do is you can actually try and CC them before they actually charge up their weapon, or if they actually manage to start firing, I really recommend that you get out of the way unless you're tanky enough. So you either use CC or you kite around them if you need to. Next up we have the Destined. Now the Destined are also a shielded enemy, and they are a medium to close range shotgun combatant. They can actually cloak everything around them, and you see this when they kind of like do a fist pose, I guess, and they cloak everything around them, which makes them really annoying in groups. They can also throw a grenade that when explodes emits this like spherical orange AoE that deals constant damage, so you really need to watch out for grenades and for Destined in groups, because you can actually find that you can easily get flanked by multiple enemies that you can't see on the compass because they all got cloaked by Destins. Now the main way that you can deal with these or circumnavigate them is there's a lot of kind of AoE abilities inside character kits, so you use that to your advantage. You move around AoE, or you try and kill them before they cloak. You can also try and shoot them while they're cloaked. What you do is you look at the reticle of your weapon, and when it turns red, that means that there's an enemy in sight. It's kind of risky, and I guess kind of very obscure, because they also can move out of range, so you might find that you're very hard to target them. That's only recommended if you know that you can take them up quickly, or if you isolate them in an area where they can't move a lot. That's all I gotta say for them. Next up we have the Fiends. Now Fiends are what I would consider an armored boss mob. So with the Fiends, you can, if you imagine the Hulk but cement colored and walks on all fours, that's pretty much what a Fiend is. They have a charging melee attack which staggers you. They also have a insta sync kill at close range. Now I highly advise that you run the fuck away from this guy, and that is because their sync kill has a very deceptive long range. Even though you may not look like you're in range, there are plenty of videos, plenty of clips out there where it shows that the range on that could be double or even triple the range of his arm. Do not get close to this monster. Do not get close. I advise using long range fire, even if you have a close range weapon. Use long range abilities, use long range fire. Now the weak spots on this guy are the head, obviously, and they also have kind of like gills on the side and on the back, and those are the weak points for the Fiend. Next up we have the Ascendant. Now the Ascendant is also a boss mob, but he has a special mechanic, and that is he has a damage immune shield. Floating around the shield is this orb called the Ascendant Orb. Now what you want to do if you want to kill the Ascendant is that you need to first take down the orb, and then you need to then try and kill him quickly. Now the thing is that not a lot of people can kill him when the orb goes down. The only way that I can reliably suggest that you kill him when the orb is down, in one instance of the orb breaking, is that you need all 4 of you to constantly try damage and try and kill the Ascendant. That doesn't happen a lot at the time, so you can expect to try and shoot down the orbs 2 or 3 times. They shoot a kind of projectile, slow moving projectile, which penetrates walls and shields and also staggers. It's like a large orange spherical projectile weapon. It has a bit of a charge up, and he also has a insta-kill melee grab. But when that happens, he kind of projects a orange AoE on the ground, and he also kind of emits this like piercing noise, and that's your cue to get the fuck out of that area. Otherwise, you will get grabbed and sync killed. Now, the animation is long enough that you can actually use a Cobra missile to break the shield in one shot. Now, if you break the orb while the person is in the sync kill animation, the Ascendant will actually drop the person, so it's pretty useful for that. The weak point is obviously still in their head, and I think the orb is also counted as a weak spot. I'm not sure if that changes anything. You just kill the orb anyways. That's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and this one's a bit of a long one, over 20 minutes, yeesh. But hopefully the others won't be as long, I'm not sure. Anyways, the part 3 will be about classes, power, and power interactions. Hopefully you enjoy the content, and I'll see you next time.